I rejected the Mafia boss's insult with a slap. He caught my hand, kissed the palm. There she is, the fire I've been looking for. The crystal chandelier above table 7 refracted light like shattered promises, casting fractured rainbows across the white linen tablecloth. I'd been on my feet for 6 hours straight, my lower back screaming its protest with every step, the arch supports in my sensible black flats having given up their noble fight somewhere around hour 4. The private dining room at Luciano's was reserved tonight for men in suits that whispered wealth with every thread, their laughter sharp-edged and proprietary, filling the space with the kind of confidence that came from never having to check a price tag or worry about whether the electricity bill would clear. I'd learned to make myself invisible in rooms like this. Smile, nod, pour the wine with the label facing out. Never make eye contact long enough to be remembered. It was a survival skill I'd honed over 3 years of waiting tables at establishments where my presence was meant to be functional, not personal. I was furniture with a pulse, and that was fine. I needed the tips, not the attention. But tonight, something felt different. Wrong. The air in the private room held a voltage I couldn't name, a crackling tension that made the fine hairs on my arms stand at attention. The men gathered around the table weren't just wealthy. They radiated a darker sort of power, the kind that came with consequences. "Mafia," my coworker Jen had whispered earlier, her eyes wide. "Don't stare, don't linger, don't ask questions." I'd nodded, my stomach tightening into a familiar knot of anxiety. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Luca's kindergarten fees were due next week, and the sitter charged by the hour. I approached the table with a fresh carafe of coffee, my professional smile fixed firmly in place. My gaze trained on a point just past their shoulders. They were in the middle of some discussion, voices low and urgent, but they fell silent as I drew near. I could feel their eyes tracking my movement, assessing, dismissing. I was used to it. I set the carafe down gently, began refilling cups that were still half full because it gave me something to do with my hands. That's when he spoke. "You." The voice was low, a gravelly command that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and straight into my chest. "Coffee, and make it worth the wait." I looked up before I could stop myself, my professional veneer cracking for just a fraction of a second. He sat at the head of the table, a king on a throne he hadn't bothered to acknowledge. Dominic Russo. I'd heard his name whispered by the hostess with a mixture of fear and fascination. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble if marble could look that cruel and that beautiful simultaneously. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and unreadable, fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. He snapped his fingers. Actually snapped them, like I was a dog being called to heel. Something hot and fierce flared in my chest, burning away the careful compliance I'd wrapped around myself like armor. I'd been diminished and dismissed my entire life. By Luca's father who'd walked out the day I'd told him I was pregnant. By landlords who looked at my age and my single mother status and saw risk. By every person who'd ever assumed that being poor meant being less. But I'd never, not once, let anyone snap their fingers at me. I set the coffee pot down on the table with a firm thunk that made the cups rattle. "My name is Maya," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "And please works better than commands." The room went silent. Not the natural pause of conversation, but a sudden, suffocating vacuum of sound. Every man at the table froze, their faces registering varying degrees of shock and anticipation. Someone sucked in a breath. Another man, broad-shouldered with a scar cutting through his eyebrow, leaned back in his chair, as if to distance himself from the impending explosion. Dominic Russo's expression didn't change. He simply leaned back, one arm draped casually over the back of his chair, and studied me with the kind of focus a scientist might give to an unexpected variable in an experiment. Then slowly a smile curved his lips. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted something interesting. "Feisty," he said, his voice a low purr that raised goosebumps along my arms. His eyes never left mine. I like my coffee like I like my women, hot and obedient. The table erupted in laughter, the sound harsh and mocking, designed to put me in my place. Heat flooded my face, humiliation and rage warring for dominance. My hand moved before my brain could intervene, before common sense could slam on the brakes, before the part of me that needed this job could scream no. Don't. You can't afford to. The slap connected with his cheek with a sharp, satisfying crack that silenced the laughter instantly. The world tilted. My palm stung. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. And for one suspended moment, I couldn't believe what I'd just done. I'd hit him. I'd hit Dominic Russo, a man whose name people whispered with fear, in front of his entire crew, in the middle of his private dinner. I tried to pull my hand back, to retreat, to disappear, but his hand shot out with a speed that made me gasp. His fingers wrapped around my wrist, not bruising but absolutely unyielding, and he pulled my hand back toward him. I stumbled forward, caught off balance, and watched in stunned disbelief as he turned my palm upward. Then he kissed it. Slowly, deliberately. His lips pressed against the center of my palm, warm and firm, his eyes locked on mine the entire time. The contact sent a shock of sensation racing up my arm, electric and dangerous, making every nerve ending in my body snap to attention. There she is, he murmured against my skin, his breath ghosting over the sensitive flesh. His voice had dropped to something darker, more intimate, edged with genuine appreciation. The fire I've been looking for. I yanked my hand back, my entire body trembling with adrenaline and something else I refused to name. Keep looking, I managed, my voice shaking but defiant. I'm not interested. I turned and walked away, my legs unsteady, my heart a wild drumbeat in my ears. I didn't run. Running would show fear, and I wouldn't give him that. But I moved quickly, pushing through the door of the private dining room and into the main restaurant. The sounds of normal dinner service, clinking silverware, polite conversation, the gentle piped-in jazz, felt surreal after the charged silence I'd left behind. Jen grabbed my arm as I passed the server station. Oh my God, Maya, are you okay? What happened? Her face was pale, her eyes wide with concern and a hint of vicarious thrill. I'm fine, I lied, pulling away gently. I need to check on table 12. I made it through the rest of my shift on autopilot, my body performing the familiar motions while my mind replayed the scene in the private room on an endless loop. What had I been thinking? I couldn't afford to lose this job. I had Luca to think about, bills that wouldn't pay themselves, a life held together with duct tape and sheer stubborn will. And I'd just slapped a Mafia boss across the face. When I clocked out at midnight, my manager Frank called me into his office. My heart sank. This was it. I was fired. I'd have to beg for my job back, grovel, explain about Luca and the bills, and Table 7 left this for you, Frank said, sliding an envelope across his desk. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the curiosity burning in his eyes. I'm not going to ask questions, Maya, but be careful. I took the envelope with numb fingers and didn't open it until I was in the cab heading home, my tips from the night clutched in my other hand. Inside was a stack of bills. I counted them twice, not believing what I was seeing. $5,000, and tucked between the hundreds was a thick business card, cream-colored and expensive, with a single phone number embossed in black. On the back, written in neat, masculine script, was one word: courage. I stared at it for the entire ride home, the word blurring in my vision. Courage. As if he knew. As if he'd seen straight through my defiant exterior to the terrified woman beneath, the one who went to bed every night calculating how many more months she could keep this precarious life from collapsing. I threw the card away when I got home, dropped it straight into the kitchen trash, buried it under coffee grounds and empty yogurt containers. The money I kept? I'd be a fool not to, but the card was a complication I couldn't afford. Men like Dominic Russo didn't give without expecting something in return, and I had nothing to offer but the fire that had already burned me too many times. Luca was asleep in his bed, his small body curled around his favorite stuffed brachiosaurus, his dark curls matted against his flushed cheek. He'd kicked off his blanket, as always, and his dinosaur pajamas were twisted around his torso. I carefully straightened him out, pulled the blanket back over his small frame, and pressed a kiss to his forehead. He smelled like the lavender soap I used for his bath, and something uniquely him. Sweet and perfect, and worth every sacrifice I'd ever made. Mama? He mumbled, his eyes cracking open. Shh, baby. Go back to sleep. I'm home. Did you bring dinner? His voice was thick with sleep, but hopeful. My heart clenched. I'd promised him I'd bring home a dessert from the restaurant if they had any left over. I forgot tonight, sweetheart. I'm sorry, but tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow for sure. He nodded, already drifting back under. Love you, Mama. Love you more than the whole world, mijo. I stood in his doorway for a long moment, watching him sleep, letting the simple peace of his presence wash away the chaos of the evening. This was what mattered. Not dangerous men with storm cloud eyes, not cryptic cards and impossible tips. Just this. My son safe and warm, his future stretching out before him full of possibility, because I would break my back to make sure he had opportunities I'd never been given. I was scraping by, but we were making it. We didn't need complications. The next week passed in a blur of motion. I worked lunch shifts at Luciano's, then raced across town to pick Luca up from kindergarten, then worked evening shifts at Rosie's Diner, the 24-hour truck stop where the coffee was terrible and the tips were worse, but the rent was always due. Luca came with me to the diner sometimes, doing his homework in a corner booth while I served truckers and night shift workers. His presence both a comfort and a reminder of everything I was working for. Mama, what's a T-Rex's favorite number? He asked one evening, looking up from his dinosaur encyclopedia with serious brown eyes. I don't know, baby. What is it? 8! He dissolved into giggles. Get it? Because they ate everything. I laughed despite my exhaustion, ruffling his curls. That's a good one. Did you make that up? No, Marcus told me at school. He knows everything about dinosaurs. Well, almost everything. I know more. He said this without arrogance. Just the simple confidence of a 5-year-old who'd found his passion. Of course you do. He went back to his book, his small fingers tracing the outline of a stegosaurus, and I went back to refilling coffee cups and pretending my feet didn't feel like they were on fire. I'd almost forgotten about Dominic Russo. Almost convinced myself that the encounter had been an anomaly, a weird blip in the normal grinding routine of my life. I'd deposited the money, anonymously, in cash, spread across 3 different trips to the bank so it wouldn't trigger any flags, and tried not to think about where it had come from or what it might mean. Then, he walked into Rosie's Diner. It was just past 8 on a Tuesday evening. The dinner rush had ended, leaving behind the usual collection of regulars nursing coffee and pie. Luca was in his corner booth, carefully coloring a picture of a velociraptor, his tongue sticking out in concentration. I was refilling the ketchup bottles, glamorous work, when the door chimed. I looked up automatically, my customer service smile ready, and froze. Dominic Russo looked impossibly out of place in Rosie's fluorescent lighting. His suit, even more expensive than the one I remembered, seemed to absorb the harsh light, and his presence turned every head in the diner. He scanned the room with the efficiency of someone used to assessing threats, and when his eyes landed on me, I saw recognition flash across his face, followed by something that looked almost like satisfaction. He walked directly to the counter and sat down on one of the cracked vinyl stools, his movements fluid and purposeful. My hands were shaking as I approached him, the ketchup bottle still clutched in my grip. What are you doing here? I kept my voice low, my eyes darting toward Luca's booth. My son hadn't looked up yet, too absorbed in his coloring. Having coffee. His voice was as I remembered it, low, controlled, laced with amusement. This is a diner. You serve coffee. How did you find me? One dark eyebrow arched. You're not hard to find, Maya Rodriguez. The sound of my full name in his mouth sent a chill down my spine. I don't want trouble. Neither do I. He glanced down at the laminated menu, though I suspected he had no intention of actually ordering anything. You threw away my card. I felt my face heat. You gave me $5,000. That was more than enough. It was a tip. For courage. His eyes lifted to mine, and I saw something in them I couldn't quite decipher. Not threat, not quite kindness, but something in between. You threw away my number. I'm not interested in whatever game you're playing. Not a game. He pushed the menu aside and leaned forward, his elbows on the counter, closing the distance between us until I could smell his cologne. something dark and woody that made my traitorous body respond with awareness. You slapped me. Do you know how many people have dared to do that? I'm guessing not many. 0, you're the first. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I appreciated it. The honesty, so I'm returning the favor. Your ex-boyfriend, Jake Martinez, he's planning to file for custody of your son. The world tilted. My stomach dropped, and I had to grab the edge of the counter to steady myself. How do you know about Jake? I make it my business to know about people who interest me. And you, Maya Rodriguez, interest me. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A business card, but not his own. This one was embossed with gold lettering. Patricia Valdez, family law attorney. She's the best. She's expecting your call. Pro bono. I don't need your charity. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, laced with panic and pride in equal measure. It's not charity, it's respect. He stood, towering over me even with the counter between us. For a woman who slapped me and walked away, most people can't, you did. That's worth something. He placed the card deliberately on the counter between us, his fingers brushing mine for just a second. No strings, Maya. Just respect for someone who shouldn't have to fight men who don't deserve her. He turned to leave, then paused. His gaze drifted to the corner booth where Luca sat, finally looking up from his coloring, his curious brown eyes taking in the tall stranger with interest. Your son? Dominic asked quietly. Every protective instinct I possessed roared to life. Yes, and he has nothing to do with whatever this is. Dominic's expression softened fractionally, a barely perceptible shift that transformed his harsh features into something almost human. Good. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a 20, and left it on the counter for a coffee he hadn't ordered. Call the lawyer, Maya. Don't let him take your fire. He walked out, the door chiming behind him, leaving me standing there with my heart in my throat and a business card burning a hole in my palm. Mama? Luca appeared at my elbow, his dinosaur clutched to his chest. Who was that man? He looked like a superhero. Was he a superhero? I swallowed hard, shoving the card into my apron pocket. No, baby. Just a customer. He looked cool, like Batman, but without the cape. Luca's eyes were shining with that easy childhood wonder that saw adventure in everything. Did he like your coffee? I don't know. I crouched down to his level, needing to ground myself in something real and solid and safe. Did you finish your velociraptor? He nodded enthusiastically, holding up the picture. I made it blue, even though we don't really know what color they were because skin doesn't fossilize. But I think they were blue. I think you're absolutely right. I pulled him into a hug, breathing in his little boy scent, letting it calm the frantic beating of my heart. But that night, after I'd put Luca to bed in our cramped 2-bedroom apartment, after I'd done the dishes and folded the laundry and made his lunch for tomorrow, I sat at our tiny kitchen table and stared at the business card, Patricia Valdez, family law attorney. The firm's address was in the financial district, the kind of place I'd never be able to afford in 1,000 years. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He's filed the paperwork. Custody hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. You need representation. Patricia Valdez, my blood ran cold. 6 weeks. Jake was serious. Jake, who'd called me a mistake when I'd told him I was pregnant. Jake, who'd walked out when Luca was 2 weeks old. Who'd sent exactly 3 child support checks in 5 years before disappearing entirely. Jake, who'd never asked to see his son, never called on birthdays, never once acted like a father, and now he wanted custody. I don't remember deciding to call. I just remember my fingers moving, dialing the number on the card, my breath shallow in my chest. Patricia Valdez. This is Maya Rodriguez. I need help. The custody case became a shadow looming over every moment of my life. Patricia Valdez was brisk, efficient, and brutally honest. Jake's case was weak, but not impossible. He had a new girlfriend, a stable address, a construction job that paid well. He'd claim he'd gotten his life together and wanted to be a father. The courts liked to see fathers involved, but he abandoned us. I protested during our second meeting in her sleek downtown office. Luca was with Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor who sometimes watched him for cheap. He didn't want anything to do with Luca for 5 years. How is that better than me? Patricia's dark eyes were kind but firm. The system doesn't care about want. It cares about stability. And on paper, Jake looks stable. He has a fiancée, did you know that? He's engaged. The betrayal was a knife between my ribs. Her family has money, political connections. If he shows up to court with her, with character witnesses, with proof of income, and a 2-bedroom apartment ready for a child. She trailed off, letting me fill in the devastating rest. Your case is strong, Maya. You've been there every day, every moment. But we need to be prepared, and you need better representation than just me. I can't afford I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about visibility. Witnesses who can speak to your character, to your fitness as a mother, your employer, neighbors, family. I don't have family. The words came out flat. My mother died when I was 18. No siblings, no one. Patricia's expression softened. Friends? Anyone who can testify that you're providing a stable, loving home? I thought of my coworkers at the diner, most of whom barely knew me. Of Mrs. Chen, who was too frail to come to court. Of the life I'd built through necessity. Functional, but achingly solitary. I'll figure it out. But I didn't figure it out. Instead, Jake started showing up. Not at my apartment. Some lawyer must have told him that would look bad. But at Luca's school. I got the call during my lunch shift at Luciano's. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Principal Morrison at Sunshine Academy. There was an incident today. A man claiming to be Luca's father tried to pick him up from school. My world tilted. What? We didn't release him, of course. You're the only authorized guardian. But the man was insistent. We had to call security. I'm documenting everything for your custody case, but I wanted you to be aware. I barely remember the rest of the conversation. I remember clocking out in the middle of my shift, Frank yelling after me, but I didn't care. Couldn't care. I remember running the 8 blocks to Sunshine Academy because I couldn't afford a cab and the bus would take too long. I remember bursting into the school office, sweaty and wild-eyed, and seeing my son sitting in a chair, his small legs swinging, his face confused. Mama! He scrambled off the chair and ran to me. I scooped him up, my baby who was getting too big to carry, but I held him anyway, my heart hammering against his small chest. Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you? I'm okay. A man said he was my papa, but I don't have a papa. I told the teacher that. His voice was matter of fact, but I could feel the slight tremor in his body. He was scared, even if he didn't want to admit it. Principal Morrison, a kind-faced woman with gray-streaked hair, approached carefully. We've added additional notes to Luca's file. Only you can pick him up. If anyone else attempts it, we'll call the police immediately. Thank you. My voice was shaking. Thank you. That night, after Luca was asleep, after he'd asked me 3 times who the man was, why he said he was a papa, why he wanted to take him for ice cream, I sat on our tiny balcony and let myself break. Just for a moment, just long enough to feel the crushing weight of trying to protect my child from a man who should have loved him, but only saw him as a pawn. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized the pattern now. My men spotted him following the school bus route. He's watching. Let me help. D.I. stared at the message, my hands trembling. Dominic Rousseau was having me followed. Having Luca followed. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, all I felt was a desperate, overwhelming exhaustion. I typed back before I could stop myself. How? The response was immediate. Let me come over. We'll talk. I should have said no. Should have blocked the number. Called the police. Anything but what I did. But I was so tired of fighting alone. So tired of being the only barrier between my son and the world that wanted to hurt him. Fine. 30 minutes. I gave him the address. Dominic arrived exactly 30 minutes later, as promised. I watched from the window as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of my apartment building, looking as out of place in this neighborhood as a diamond in a coal mine. He stepped out, his movements economical and purposeful, and scanned the street with the automatic vigilance of someone who'd learned to assess threats without thinking about it. I buzzed him up before I could change my mind, then stood in my tiny living room and tried to see it through his eyes. The second-hand couch with the cushions that sagged in the middle, the coffee table I'd found on the curb and refinished myself, still bearing the scars of Luca's early crayon experiments. The walls decorated with my son's artwork. Dinosaurs in every medium imaginable, their cheerful ferocity the brightest thing in the space. It was clean but worn, functional but cramped, the home of someone who'd learned to make do. The knock on the door was soft, almost respectful. I opened it, and Dominic filled the doorway, too large and too polished for this space. He'd removed his suit jacket, and his crisp white shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. His eyes swept the apartment in one comprehensive glance, then landed on me. "Thank you for letting me come." His voice was quiet, mindful of the late hour and the child sleeping down the hall. I stepped back, letting him in. "I shouldn't have. I don't even know why I did. Because you're smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to accept it." He moved into the living room with careful steps, as if afraid his presence might break something fragile. His gaze caught on the gallery of dinosaur drawings. "Your sons?" "Luca, he's 5. Obsessed with dinosaurs." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. Alone with a dangerous man. My son asleep 20 feet away. No one who would hear me scream. "What kind of help are you offering?" Dominic turned to face me fully, and his expression was more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Jake Martinez is escalating. He tried to take Luca today. That won't be the last time. The school won't let him. Schools have protocols. Protocols can be circumvented by someone determined enough, or stupid enough." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I can put protection on you. On Luca, discreetly. People who know how to watch without being seen." "Why would you do that?" The question came out harsh, edged with suspicion. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. What do you want?" He held my gaze, and I saw something raw flicker across his features before he locked it down. "When you slapped me, you saw a man being disrespectful and you refused to tolerate it. You didn't care about consequences, didn't calculate the risk. You just acted on principle." He took a step closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. I've spent 20 years surrounded by people who bend, who compromise, who smile while they plot. You don't bend, Maya, and your son deserves a mother who stands. I want to help keep you standing. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. His voice was soft but absolute. "Let me put someone on you. A woman, Rosa, former military, trained in close protection. She's good with kids. Luca won't even know she's watching." I wanted to refuse. Every independent instinct I possessed screamed at me to handle this myself, to not owe this man anything. But I thought of Jake's face at the school, of Principal Morrison's careful professionalism masking concern, of my son asking why that man said he was a papa when Luca didn't have one. "Just protection," I said finally. "Nothing else. And if I tell you to back off, you do. Immediately." Agreed. "And you stay away from Luca. I don't want him confused or scared or... Maya." He said my name like a promise. "I'm not here to hurt your son. I'm here to make sure no one else does either." I studied his face, searching for the lie, the angle, the inevitable betrayal. But all I saw was steady resolve and something that looked almost like understanding. "Okay, but one condition." "Name it. You tell me why." "The real why. Not the noble speech about standing and bending. Why you care what happens to some waitress you don't know." For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he looked away, his gaze drifting back to Luca's dinosaur drawings. And when he spoke, his voice was rougher than before. "My mother was a waitress. Worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table after my father went to prison. She was fierce and proud, and she never bent. Not once. Not even when the world tried to break her." He paused, and I saw his throat work. "She died when I was 16. Exhaustion. The doctor called it a heart attack, but I knew better. She worked herself to death because she refused to ask for help, refused to show weakness. I watched her stand alone until it killed her. The confession hung between us, raw and unexpected. I'd expected calculation, manipulation, some smooth lie designed to gain my trust. Instead, he'd given me truth, painful and unvarnished. "I'm not your mother," I said quietly. "No, but you remind me of her. The fire, the pride, the refusal to break." He turned back to me, and his eyes were storm-dark and intense. "And I'm not 16 anymore. This time I can help, so let me." I should have said no, should have shown him the door and dealt with Jake on my own. the way I'd dealt with everything else in my life. But standing there in my shabby living room, with my son's artwork watching from the walls, and this dangerous man offering protection I desperately needed, I felt something inside me crack just slightly. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." Rosa appeared the next morning like a guardian angel disguised as a barista. She was waiting outside Sunshine Academy when I dropped Luca off. A tall woman with kind eyes and shoulders that suggested she could break a man in half if necessary. She wore jeans and a casual jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she smiled at me like we were old friends. "Maya, I'm Rosa. Dominic sent me." She kept her voice low, conversational. To anyone watching, we were just two women chatting. "I'll be around, but you won't see me most of the time." "That's the point. You're sure Luca won't notice?" I glanced back at the school doors where my son had just disappeared, his dinosaur backpack bouncing with each step. "He'll be safe. That's what matters." Rosa's expression was gentle but professional. "I have a daughter his age. I know how to keep kids feeling normal while staying alert." Something in my chest loosened, just fractionally. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Let's get through this first." She squeezed my shoulder briefly, then melted back into the morning crowd of parents and commuters. True to her word, I barely saw Rosa over the next 2 weeks, but I felt her presence. A shadow at the edge of my awareness. A comfort I hadn't known I needed. And Jake stopped appearing at the school, stopped following the bus route. Either he'd gotten the message, or someone had delivered it for him. Patricia called with updates on the custody case. Discovery was proceeding. Character witnesses were being interviewed. Everything was moving forward with the inexorable weight of the legal system. I went to work, picked up Luca, made dinners and read bedtime stories, and tried not to let the fear consume me. Luca, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued his 5-year-old existence with unshakable enthusiasm. He made a diorama of a triceratops habitat for show and tell. He lost his first tooth and put it under his pillow for the tooth fairy. I left $2 all I could spare, and he acted like I'd given him a fortune. He asked me 47 questions about whether dinosaurs would have liked pizza. Probably not. I told him one evening while we ate our own pizza, discount frozen, but he didn't care. They didn't have cheese back then. What about the herbivores? They ate plants. Pizza has tomato sauce. That's made from plants. His logic was impeccable, his face serious. You're absolutely right. Herbivore dinosaurs would definitely have liked pizza. I'm smart like that. He said it without arrogance, just the simple confidence of a child who felt loved and secure. It made my heart ache with fierce protectiveness. That night, after Luca was asleep, my phone buzzed. "How is he?" D.I. stared at the message for a long moment. Dominic had been true to his word. Rosa was present but invisible, and he hadn't appeared again. No more visits, no more cryptic cards, just the quiet knowledge that someone was watching. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like breathing room. He's good. Made a dinosaur diorama for school. Lost a tooth? The tooth fairy pay well? I felt a smile tug at my lips despite myself. $2. I'm clearly overpaying. Generous. He's lucky to have you. The message made something warm unfurl in my chest. Dangerous and unwelcome. Thank you. For Rosa. For all of it. You don't have to thank me. But you're welcome. I set the phone down, trying to ignore the fact that I'd been smiling at a text from a Mafia boss like we were old friends. This was protection, nothing more. A temporary arrangement until the custody case was resolved, and Jake was out of our lives for good. I couldn't afford to let it be anything else. The routine lasted 3 weeks. 3 blessed weeks of relative peace, of feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. Luca thrived. I worked my shifts. Patricia built our case. Everything was moving in the right direction. Then Rosa called in sick. "I'm so sorry, Maya," she said, her voice raspy with congestion. "Caught something from my daughter's school. I can have someone else cover—" "No, it's fine." I glanced at Luca, who was putting on his shoes for school with the painstaking concentration of a child who'd recently mastered Velcro. "We'll be okay for one day. You sure?" "Dominic won't like it." "Dominic doesn't get a vote." "We'll be fine, Rosa. Feel better." I hung up and tried to quash the flutter of anxiety in my stomach. One day. We'd been fine before Rosa, and we'd be fine for one day without her. Jake had been quiet. The custody case was 3 weeks away. Everything was under control. I should have known better than to tempt fate. I dropped Luca at school without incident, worked the lunch shift at Luciano's, and arrived back at Sunshine Academy at exactly 2:45 for pickup. The late September afternoon was perfect. Golden light, cool breeze, the kind of day that made you believe good things were possible. Parents clustered in small groups, chatting while they waited for the doors to open. I stood slightly apart, as always, checking my phone for the schedule of my evening shift. The doors opened. Children poured out in a noisy, joyful wave. I spotted Luca's dark curls immediately, his dinosaur backpack bouncing as he raced toward me. Mama, I learned about pteranodons today. They're not actually dinosaurs, they're pterosaurs. But they lived at the same time and they could fly, and Luca, the voice cut through the afternoon like a blade. I looked up and my blood turned to ice. Jake stood 10 feet away, his face flushed and determined. He'd cleaned himself up since I'd last seen him. New clothes, fresh haircut, the veneer of respectability. But his eyes were wild, desperate. I pulled Luca behind me automatically, my body a shield. You need to leave. Now. He's my son, too. Jake took a step forward and I saw parents turning to watch, sensed the shift in the afternoon's energy from pleasant to tense. I have rights. I'm going to be part of his life whether you like it or not. The court will decide that. Until then, you stay away from us. My voice was steady, despite the fear flooding my system. Keep calm, don't escalate. There are witnesses. The court? Jake laughed, harsh and bitter. You think you're going to win? You think some judge is going to give you full custody when I have a stable home, a good job, a fiancé who wants to be a mother to him? I don't think. I know. I felt Luca's small hands clutch the back of my shirt, felt his face press against my spine, because I've been there every single day of his life, and you walked away. That matters. I made mistakes. I'm making up for them now. Jake's expression shifted, trying for reasonable, but the wildness in his eyes betrayed him. Just let me talk to him. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. No. He's my son. He's the child you abandoned. My voice rose despite my best intentions. Around us, I could feel the crowd of parents watching, some with phones out. Good. Let them record. Let them see. You don't get to show up 5 years later and play Father of the Year. Jake's face twisted with rage. You selfish bitch. You're keeping him from me. He lunged forward. I had just enough time to push Luca away, toward the cluster of watching parents, before Jake grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising, furious, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he was going to hit me. Let go of me. I kept my voice level, even as my heart hammered. You're assaulting me in front of witnesses. This isn't helping your custody case. I don't care about the case. Spittle flew from his mouth, his eyes crazed. I care about my rights. About him knowing who his real father is. Let her go. The voice was cold enough to freeze blood. Jake's grip on my arm loosened involuntarily as we both turned. Dominic Russo stood 5 feet away, having materialized from nowhere like a shadow given form. He was perfectly still, his expression carved from stone, but the threat radiating from him was palpable. 2 men flanked him, large, silent, their presence a promise of violence barely leashed. This doesn't concern you, Jake said, but his voice wavered. You're touching her. That concerns me. Dominic's eyes never left Jake's face. Remove your hand, now. Jake let go like I'd burned him. Who the hell are you? Someone who keeps his promises. Dominic moved forward with predatory grace, placing himself between Jake and me. Maya, take Luca. Get in the car. I looked past him and saw the black SUV idling at the curb, its door open. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab my son and disappear, but Luca was pressed against Mrs. Harrison from his class, his small face pale and frightened, and I couldn't leave him for even a second. Luca, come here, baby. I held out my hand, keeping my voice calm. We're going to get in the car now. He ran to me and I scooped him up despite his weight, feeling him shake. It's okay. You're safe. I've got you. Is that the man from before? The one who said he was my papa? His voice was small, terrified. Yes. but he's not going to hurt you, I promise. I carried him to the SUV, aware of Dominic and his men forming a wall between us and Jake, aware of the parents watching with wide eyes and ready phones, aware that this moment would define something I didn't yet understand. The driver was already in position. I climbed into the back seat with Luca on my lap, and the door closed with a solid thunk that felt like safety. Through the tinted window, I watched Dominic lean close to Jake, saw him speak words I couldn't hear. Jake's face went white, then red, then white again. He stumbled backward, nodding frantically, and then turned and ran. Dominic watched him go, then turned and walked to the SUV. He opened the passenger door and slid in, his movements controlled and calm despite what had just happened. "Drive," he said quietly. The SUV pulled smoothly away from the curb. Luca was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking against mine. I held him tight, murmuring nonsense words of comfort, my own hands trembling with adrenaline. "Where are we going?" I managed to ask. "Somewhere safe." Dominic glanced back at us, and his harsh expression softened when he saw Luca. "I'm sorry he had to see that. You shouldn't have been there." But even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. He'd saved us. Jake had been seconds away from, what? Taking Luca? Hurting me? I didn't know, and I was grateful not to find out. Rosa called me when she got sick. I should have been there earlier. His jaw was tight, with what looked like self-recrimination. I was in a meeting. By the time I got the message, "You were there when it mattered." The admission cost me, but it was true. "Thank you." Luca lifted his head from my shoulder, his tear-stained face turning toward Dominic. "Are you a superhero?" His voice was small, confused. "Like Batman?" Dominic's expression did something complicated. He looked at my son with an intensity that made my breath catch. And when he spoke, his voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it. "No, not a superhero. Just someone who wants to keep your mom safe." "Why?" Luca's 5-year-old directness was relentless. "Because she's brave. And brave people deserve to be protected." Luca considered this with the seriousness of a child processing trauma, then nodded slowly. "Okay." He turned back to me, burrowing into my chest. "Can we go home, Mama?" "Soon, baby. I promise." The SUV drove through the city streets, smooth and steady, while my mind raced. Everything had changed in the span of 5 minutes. Jake had assaulted me in public, in front of witnesses and cameras. That would destroy his custody case. But it also meant he was desperate and unpredictable, which made him more dangerous, and Dominic had intervened. Had placed himself physically between my son and danger, had promised protection and delivered it. I looked up and found him watching me in the rearview mirror, his storm cloud eyes unreadable. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "When Luca's settled," he nodded once. "We will." The SUV turned down a tree-lined street in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Not wealthy, but comfortable, with well-kept houses and yards where children's bikes lay scattered. It pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story home, cream-colored with blue shutters. "Where are we?" I asked. "My sister's house. Sophia. She's expecting you." Dominic opened his door and came around to open mine. She has a son about Luca's age. Thought it might help him feel more comfortable. Before I could respond, the front door opened and a woman emerged. She was younger than Dominic, maybe 30, with the same dark hair and sharp features softened by warmth. She smiled at us, open and genuine. "You must be Maya. And this is Luca?" She crouched down to his eye level. "I'm Sophia. I have a little boy named Marco who really, really wants to show someone his dinosaur collection. Think you'd want to see it?" Luca looked at me uncertain. I brushed the tears from his cheeks. "Go ahead, mijo. I'll be right here." He let Sophia take his hand and lead him inside, though he looked back 3 times to make sure I was still there. As soon as the door closed behind them, I turned to Dominic. "Start talking." "What did you say to Jake?" "That if he ever touched you or came near Luca again, he'd disappear. And that I have the means to make that happen without anyone ever finding him." He said it calmly, matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. My stomach clenched. "You threatened to kill him." "No, I promised consequences. There's a difference." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside." "You're shaking." I was. The adrenaline was wearing off. leaving behind the shakes and the nausea. I followed him into the house, into a cheerful living room where children's toys were scattered across plush carpet and family photos lined the walls. Sophia had taken Luca upstairs. I could hear boyish laughter and the sound of dinosaur roars. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. He could press charges, assault, threats. He won't. Dominic sat across from me, his elbows on his knees, his gaze steady. He knows what I am, what I can do, and his fiancé's family won't want the association. They'll cut him loose the moment they hear my name connected to his. So that's it. You threaten him and he disappears? Yes, I should have been horrified. Should have been repelled by the casual certainty with which he discussed violence. Instead, all I felt was a bone-deep relief that someone had finally made Jake back down, had finally made him afraid instead of me being afraid. I can't repay you for this. The words felt hollow. Inadequate. I don't want repayment. He leaned forward, closing the distance between us. I want you to let me finish what I started. Protection until the custody hearing, until the judge rules and Jake is legally out of your life. That's 3 weeks. I'm aware. And then what? You disappear? Rosa disappears? We go back to normal? His expression flickered with something I couldn't read. If that's what you want. I don't know what I want. The confession burst out before I could stop it. I want my son safe. I want to stop being terrified every time someone knocks on the door. I want to sleep through the night without nightmares about losing Luca. I want... My voice cracked. I just want to breathe. Dominic moved then, coming to sit beside me on the couch. He didn't touch me, but his presence was solid and warm and steady. Then breathe. Let me handle the fear for a while. That's not how the world works. It's how my world works. His voice was low, intense. You've spent 5 years carrying everything alone. Let someone else carry the weight. Just for a little while. I looked at him. This dangerous man who'd kissed my palm and threatened my ex and brought my son to his sister's house so he'd feel safe. Why do you care, really? Not the speech about your mother or my fire. The real reason. He held my gaze, and for a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly. Because when I look at you, I see someone fighting for something real. Something that matters. I've spent my life building an empire on blood and fear, and it's empty, hollow. But you're building a life for your son with your bare hands. And it's the most valuable thing I've ever seen. I want to protect that. To be part of something that matters. He paused, his jaw working. To matter to someone who isn't afraid of me. The honesty was devastating. I saw the loneliness in his eyes, the hunger for connection beneath the controlled exterior, and something in my chest cracked wide open. I should be afraid of you, I whispered. I know. But I'm not. Not anymore. His eyes darkened. You should be. Probably. I took a shaky breath. Stay until the custody hearing. Help us get through this. But you need to understand, Luca comes first, always. If at any point I think your world is going to touch him, hurt him, scare him, I'm gone. I don't care about protection or money or threats. He's my line. I understand. Dominic's voice was absolutely serious, and I respect that. He should be your line. He should be everything. Then we have a deal. He extended his hand, formal and strangely respectful. I took it, his palm warm and calloused against mine, and felt the weight of the promise settle between us. Upstairs, Luca laughed, bright and joyful and safe. And for the first time in 5 years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm I'd never experienced before. The rhythm of not being alone. Rosa returned to her post, but now Dominic was a presence too, carefully woven into the edges of our lives. He didn't push. He simply appeared, offering help in ways that felt less like charity and more like partnership. He fixed the leaky sink in our bathroom that I'd been ignoring for months. He brought groceries when he knew I'd worked a double shift, expensive items I'd never buy for myself tucked in alongside the basics. He sat with Luca when I had to work late. The two of them bent over dinosaur books at our kitchen table, Dominic's deep voice patient as he read facts about the Cretaceous period. I waited for the catch. for the moment when he'd ask for something in return, when the debt would come due. But it never came. He simply showed up, solid and steady, until his presence stopped feeling like an intrusion and started feeling like relief. Luca adjusted with the easy resilience of childhood. The incident at school became the scary day, processed through drawings and careful conversations with the child psychologist Patricia had recommended. He stopped having nightmares after the second week, started sleeping through the night again, and he became fascinated with Dominic. "Uncle Dom, did you know that velociraptors were actually only about 3 feet tall?" Luca asked one evening, perched on the couch beside Dominic while I made dinner. "The movies got them wrong. They made them too big. Is that right?" Dominic's attention was focused entirely on my son, as if nothing in the world mattered more than this conversation about dinosaur accuracy. "Yep, but they were still smart. One of the smartest dinosaurs. They hunted in packs." Luca's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. "Do you have a pack, Uncle Dom?" I nearly dropped the pan I was holding. Dominic's expression flickered with surprise, then something softer. "I have people I work with. People who help me. Like a pack." Luca nodded sagely. "That's smart." Dinosaurs knew that working together was better than being alone. "Your son is very wise," Dominic said, glancing at me over Luca's head. "He gets it from his mother," I replied quietly. After dinner, after Luca had brushed his teeth and climbed into his dinosaur pajamas, he asked a question that made my heart stop. "Mama? Can Uncle Dom read me my story tonight?" I looked at Dominic, who had frozen in the act of clearing the table. His eyes met mine, asking permission, and I saw vulnerability there beneath the usual control. "If Uncle Dom wants to," I said carefully, "I'd be honored." His voice was rough around the edges. I watched from the doorway as Dominic settled into the chair beside Luca's bed, the space too small for his frame, and picked up the worn copy of Danny and the Dinosaur. Luca curled under his covers, his stuffed Brachiosaurus tucked under one arm, and listened with the absolute trust of a child who felt safe. Dominic read slowly, his deep voice gentle, stumbling occasionally over the simple words like he was out of practice with children's books. When he finished, Luca reached out and patted his hand. "You're good at this," Luca said sleepily. "You should do it more." "Maybe I will." Dominic's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "Sleep well, Luca." "You too, Uncle Dom. Don't let the bedbugs bite." I stepped back as Dominic emerged from the room, pulling the door mostly closed. We stood in the narrow hallway of my apartment, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the emotion he was struggling to contain. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me with him. You've earned it." The words were simple but weighted with everything I couldn't yet say. "Come on." I made coffee. We sat on my cramped balcony, barely big enough for 2 folding chairs, and a dying plant I kept forgetting to water. The city sprawled below us, distant and glittering, while we existed in our small pocket of quiet. "I talked to Patricia today," I said, cradling my coffee mug for warmth. "Jake's fiancé's family cut him loose. They saw the video from the school. Want nothing to do with him. Good. She thinks the judge will rule in my favor. Full custody, supervised visitation only if Jake can prove stability." I took a sip of coffee, trying to contain the hope that felt too fragile to trust. "It's almost over. How do you feel?" I laughed, short and sharp, terrified that I'm jinxing it by believing it might actually work out. "It will." He said it with absolute certainty. "You can't know that. I can. I've seen the evidence. I've seen you." He turned to look at me, his eyes catching the light from the living room behind us. "You're a good mother, Maya. The best I've ever seen. Any judge with eyes will see that." The compliment hit me square in the chest, warming something that had been cold for too long. My mother used to say that being a parent means your heart lives outside your body. I didn't understand it until I had Luca. Now I understand it every second of every day. She sounds like she was wise. She was. She also worked herself to death trying to give me opportunities. I met his eyes. "Like your mother did for you." His expression tightened. "I don't want that for you. The working to death part. Neither do I. But sometimes there isn't another choice. There's always a choice. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I meant what I said about wanting to help. Not just with Jake, but with everything. You shouldn't have to work 2 jobs. Luca shouldn't have to come to the diner and do homework in a corner booth. That's not your responsibility. What if I want it to be? The words came out low, intense, stopping my protest cold. What if I want to be part of this? Part of helping you build the life you're trying to give him? My heart hammered against my ribs. Why? Because in 3 weeks, you've become the most real thing in my life. You and Luca, sitting at your table, reading dinosaur books, watching him laugh. That matters more than anything I've built in 20 years. He paused, his gaze steady and unflinching. I'm not asking you to owe me. I'm asking you to let me in. Really in. Not as protection or obligation, but as someone who wants to be here. You barely know us. I know enough. I know you're fierce and brave, and you love your son more than anything. I know you slapped me when I disrespected you, and you apologized to no one. I know Luca thinks velociraptors hunted in packs, and that working together is better than being alone. His voice softened. I know I've never wanted anything the way I want to be part of your pack. Tears stung my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. I can't afford to get this wrong. Luca's been through enough. If you're not sure, I'm sure. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand. His palm was warm, solid, anchoring. I've never been more sure of anything. I looked down at our joined hands, at the contrast between his scarred strength and my tired fingers stained with dish soap and coffee. It should have felt wrong, this connection between his dangerous world and my fragile one. Instead, it felt like possibility. Then stay, I whispered. Not just until the hearing. Stay. His fingers tightened around mine. I'm not going anywhere. We sat in the quiet dark, hands linked, while the city hummed below, and my son slept safe inside. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I let myself hope for something more than just survival. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning in late October. I'd taken the day off from both jobs, asked Mrs. Chen to watch Luca, and tried not to vomit from nervousness. Patricia had prepared me thoroughly. The questions they'd ask, the evidence we'd present, the fact that Jake's assault had essentially destroyed his case. But knowing something intellectually and trusting it emotionally were 2 different things. Dominic showed up at my apartment at 7 a.m, carrying coffee and pastries from the expensive bakery downtown. You need to eat, he said, setting them on my kitchen table. I can't. I'll throw up. Then you'll throw up. But you need something in your stomach. He pulled out a chair. Sit. I sat, more because my legs were shaking than because I wanted to obey. He placed a chocolate croissant in front of me, its buttery smell making my stomach clench. I can't do this. The words burst out before I could stop them. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if Jake convinces them he's changed? What if... Maya. Dominic crouched in front of my chair, his hands coming to rest on my knees. Look at me. I forced my eyes to meet his. You've done everything right. You've been there every day of Luca's life. You've worked yourself to exhaustion to give him stability and love and safety. Jake assaulted you in front of witnesses and cameras. There is no scenario where you lose today. His voice was absolutely certain. But even if the impossible happened, even if somehow the system failed, I would make sure Luca stayed with you. Do you understand? Whatever it takes. You can't just... I can, and I would. His eyes were storm-dark and utterly serious. You're not alone anymore. Remember that. I took a shaky breath, then another, letting his certainty anchor me. Okay. He stood, pressing a kiss to my forehead that felt like a promise. Now eat. You'll need your strength to keep from smiling when you win. I managed half the croissant and 3 sips of coffee before we had to leave. Dominic drove me to the courthouse himself, his presence in the driver's seat a comfort I hadn't known I needed. Patricia met us in the lobby, her expression confident and professional. Ready? She asked. No, but let's do this anyway. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, less dramatic. Just wood paneling and fluorescent lights and a judge who looked tired behind her bench. Jake sat on the opposite side with his lawyer, his face pale and haggard. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The hearing took 3 hours. Patricia presented evidence of my consistent presence in Luca's life. School records showing I was the primary contact. Medical records with my name on every form. Testimony from Luca's teachers about my involvement. She showed the video from the school, Jake's assault captured in clear detail. She called Mrs. Chen, who testified about watching me raise Luca alone, about the sacrifices I'd made. Jake's lawyer tried to paint him as a reformed man, someone who'd made mistakes but wanted to be a father now. But without his fiancée's family's support, without character witnesses who'd scattered the moment Dominic's name had been mentioned, his case crumbled like wet paper. The judge listened to everything with an impassive expression, taking notes, asking occasional clarifying questions. When the testimony was done, she removed her glasses and looked at both of us. "I'm going to rule from the bench," she said. "This case is straightforward." My heart stopped. "Ms. Rodriguez, you have demonstrated consistent, loving care for your son over 5 years. You have provided stability, safety, and support, despite significant financial challenges. You have prioritized his needs above your own at every turn." She turned to Jake, her expression hardening. "Mr. Martinez, you abandoned your child and his mother. You have provided no financial support. You have made no effort to maintain a relationship with your son until now, when it suited your purposes. And you assaulted Ms. Rodriguez in public, in front of your child, demonstrating a fundamental lack of judgment and self-control." Jake's face crumpled. I couldn't breathe. "Custody is awarded to Ms. Rodriguez. Full legal and physical custody. Mr. Martinez, you will have supervised visitation rights only, contingent on completion of anger management counseling and parenting classes. If Ms. Rodriguez consents to visitation after those requirements are met." The judge looked at me. "The choice will be yours, Ms. Rodriguez. You've earned that right." The gavel came down. I'd won. The relief was so overwhelming that I actually swayed in my seat. Patricia grabbed my arm, steadying me, her face split in a wide smile. "We did it. You did it." "I did it," I whispered. And then I was crying, messy and undignified, all the fear and tension of 5 years pouring out in great hiccuping sobs. Patricia hugged me. The bailiff handed me tissues, and when I finally looked up, Dominic was standing at the back of the courtroom, his expression fierce with pride and something that looked like joy. I walked to him on shaking legs, and he pulled me into his arms, holding me tight while I cried against his chest. "You did it," he murmured into my hair. "I knew you would. I need to get Luca. I need to tell him. I'll drive you." He pulled back just enough to cut my face, his thumbs brushing away my tears. "Your son is going to be so proud of his mama." Luca's reaction was perfect and heartbreaking and exactly what I needed. When I told him that a judge had said he got to stay with me forever, that the scary man wouldn't be coming back, he threw his arms around my neck and squeezed so tight I couldn't breathe. "I knew it," he said fiercely. "I knew you'd keep me safe." "You always do," Mrs. Chen cried. I cried again. Dominic watched from the doorway with an expression that made my heart ache. That evening, he took us out to celebrate. Not somewhere expensive and intimidating, but to a family restaurant with checkered tablecloths and a kid's menu that came with crayons. Luca ordered chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs and talked nonstop about the fossil exhibit he wanted to visit at the museum. "Can Uncle Dom come with us?" he asked through a mouthful of nugget stegosaurus. He should learn more about dinosaurs. "If Uncle Dom wants to," I said, smiling. "I'd love to." Dominic looked at me over Luca's head, and the warmth in his eyes made my breath catch. "If your mom doesn't mind..." "I don't mind." After dinner, Dominic drove us home. Luca fell asleep in the car, exhausted from the emotional day, and Dominic carried him upstairs to our apartment like he weighed nothing. I watched him settle my son into bed with a gentleness that felt at odds with everything I knew about his world, and felt something shift irrevocably in my chest. When he emerged from Luca's room, I was waiting in the living room, my heart hammering. "Stay," I said quietly. He went still. "Maya, not just for tonight. Not just until the next crisis. Stay." I took a step toward him, closing the distance. "You said you wanted to be part of our pack. So be part of it. Really part of it. You're sure?" His voice was rough. "My world isn't safe. You know what I am? I know what you've been to us. I know you've kept us safe when I couldn't do it alone. I know you read Luca bedtime stories and fixed our sink and made him laugh when he was scared. I reached up, touching his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. I know that when I look at you, I don't see a mafia boss. I see someone who matters, someone I want to matter to. His hands came up to frame my face, trembling slightly. You matter. God, Maya, you matter more than anything. Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry and full of weeks of restraint breaking all at once. I opened my mouth under his, tasting coffee and want, my fingers tangling in his hair to pull him closer. He groaned against my lips, one arm banding around my waist to lift me onto my toes, and I felt the hardness of his body pressed against mine, solid and real and everything I'd been denying I wanted. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I love you, he said, the words rough and unpolished. I've loved you since you slapped me and walked away. I just didn't know it yet. Tears pricked my eyes again. I love you too. I didn't want to, but I do. We should probably do this properly. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes dark with heat and something tender. Dates, courtship, whatever you're supposed to do when you fall in love with someone who has a 5-year-old. Probably. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. But Luke is asleep, and I'm tired of being careful. His eyes darkened further. Maya, I trust you. With him, with me, with everything. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. Stay tonight, really stay. For a moment I thought he'd refuse, thought his self-control would win. Then his hand tightened around mine. Show me where, he said quietly. I led him to my bedroom, the space small and shabby but clean. My bed covered with the faded quilt my mother had made. I closed the door gently, listening for any sound from Luca's room down the hall, then turned to face Dominic. He stood in the center of my bedroom like he was afraid to touch anything, his eyes cataloging every detail. This is where you sleep. Yes, where you dream. Where you wake up and plan your day. Where you count your tips and worry about bills. His voice was soft, almost reverent. Yes. I crossed to him, suddenly shy despite my boldness moments before. Is that okay? It's perfect. He reached for me, his hands gentle on my waist. You're perfect. I'm tired and scared and barely holding it together most days. Perfect, he repeated, and kissed me again. This time was slower, softer. His hands moved over my body with careful reverence, learning the landscape of me through the thin fabric of my dress. I gasped when his thumb brushed the underside of my breast, arching into the touch, wanting more. Tell me if I should stop, he murmured against my lips. Anytime, for any reason. Don't stop. My hands worked at the buttons of his shirt, clumsy with want and nerves. Please don't stop. He helped me, shrugging out of the shirt and tossing it aside. His chest was a map of violence, scars cutting pale lines through tanned skin, muscles hard-earned and maintained. I traced them with tentative fingers, feeling him shudder under my touch. You're beautiful, I whispered. I'm a mess. You're mine. The possession in my voice surprised me, but I didn't take it back. If you'll let me, you're mine. I've been yours since the slap. His hands found the zipper of my dress, lowering it slowly. I just didn't know how to say it. The dress pulled at my feet, leaving me in my practical cotton bra and underwear, nothing sexy or coordinated. I waited for him to be disappointed, to see all the ways I didn't measure up to whatever he was used to. Instead, he looked at me like I was art. Maya. My name was a prayer. His hand skimmed down my sides, over the slight softness of my stomach, marks of carrying Luca that I'd never quite lost. You made a life, a person. How is that not the most powerful thing in the world? I felt tears sting my eyes again. Don't make me cry. Not now. Then let me make you feel good instead. He walked me backward to the bed, his movements controlled despite the heat in his eyes. I lay back and he followed, covering my body with his, careful not to crush me with his weight. We kissed again, long and deep, while his hands explored and mine answered, learning each other's responses. When he touched me through my underwear, I gasped against his mouth. When he slipped beneath the fabric, found me wet and ready, I actually whimpered. "Shh," he breathed. "Quiet, love. We can't wake Luca." The reminder of my son sleeping down the hall should have been a bucket of cold water. Instead, it made this more real, more significant. This wasn't just sex. It was letting someone into every part of my life, trusting him with everything. "I want you," I whispered. "All of you." He removed his pants, then mine, until we were skin to skin. The first touch of him against me made us both freeze, the moment stretching between us. "Are you sure?" His voice was strained with restraint. "Yes." I pulled him closer. "I'm sure. I need you. I have protection. I'm on birth control. Have been since Luca." I met his eyes. "I want to feel you, please." Something in his expression cracked. "Maya, please, Dominic. I want this. I want you." He moved then, joining us with aching slowness, and I felt every inch of him filling me, stretching me, making me whole in a way I hadn't known I was broken. We both went still, breathing hard, adjusting. "Okay?" he managed. "More than okay." I wrapped my legs around his waist, taking him deeper. "Move. Please move." He did, setting a rhythm that was both tender and intense, each thrust deliberate and controlled. I bit my lip to keep from crying out, my hands fisting in the sheets, in his hair, needing anchor points against the building pleasure. "Touch yourself," he whispered. "Let me watch." My hand slipped between us, finding the bundle of nerves that made me gasp. He watched my face as I touched myself, his rhythm steady and deep, his breathing harsh in the quiet room. "That's it," he murmured. "Take what you need. Let me give you everything." The pleasure built like a wave, cresting higher and higher until I couldn't hold it back. I came with his name muffled against his shoulder, my body clenching around him, and felt him follow moments later, his release pouring into me with a groan he buried against my neck. We lay tangled together afterward, both breathing hard, my heart pounding against his. He shifted to move off me, but I held him close. "Stay. Just for a minute. I'm crushing you." "I don't care." I pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "That was life-changing," he finished. "That was life-changing." "Yes." He finally rolled to the side, pulling me with him so I was tucked against his chest, his arms secure around my waist. I meant it, what I said. "I love you." "I know." I traced patterns on his chest, feeling safe and sated and impossibly hopeful. "I love you too." We lay in the quiet dark, listening to each other breathe, until practical concerns intruded. "You should probably leave before Luca wakes up," I said reluctantly. "I don't want him confused." "What if I don't want to leave?" I lifted my head to look at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want this. All of it. Morning coffee and dinosaur facts and bedtime stories and falling asleep next to you." His hand came up to cup my face. "I'm saying I want to be part of your family, if you'll let me. That's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything." I thought about it, about what it would mean to let him into every corner of our lives, to let Luca see us as something more than just friends, about the risk and the reward and the terrifying possibility of happiness. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, but we do this carefully. We let Luca adjust. We take it slow as you need." He kissed my forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." We didn't take it slow. By the end of the week, Dominic had a drawer in my dresser and a toothbrush in the bathroom. By the end of the month, he was eating breakfast with us every morning before driving Luca to school. By Thanksgiving, Luca was climbing into his lap to watch cartoons and asking when Uncle Dom was going to stay forever. "Soon," Dominic promised, meeting my eyes over Luca's head. "If your mom says it's okay." "Is it okay, Mama?" Luca turned his serious brown eyes on me. "Can Uncle Dom live with us? He makes really good pancakes." I laughed, my heart full. "That's the deciding factor? Pancakes. They're really good pancakes." Luca was completely serious. "They are pretty good," I admitted. "Okay, if Uncle Dom wants to live with us, he can." Luca cheered. Dominic's expression did something complicated and beautiful, and that weekend, he moved his things into our cramped apartment, making it even more crowded and infinitely more full of life. 3 months later, On a cold February morning, Dominic took Luca out for what he called guy breakfast. I assumed it was their usual Saturday routine, pancakes and dinosaur trivia at the diner down the street. So when they came back early, Luca practically vibrating with excitement, I was surprised. Mama, Uncle Dom asked me something really important. My heart skipped. Oh? Dominic knelt down in front of Luca, his expression serious. I wanted to make sure the man of the house approved first, he said, and then he turned to me. Maya Rodriguez, I've loved you since the moment you slapped me and showed me what real fire looks like. You've let me into your life, into Luca's life, and made me part of something that matters. I want to make that official. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Luca, barely able to contain himself, held up an even smaller box. Will you marry us? They asked together. I looked at them. This dangerous man who'd learned to read children's books and my fierce, wonderful son who'd chosen him as family, and felt my entire world shift into perfect alignment. Yes, I said through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Both of you. Luca whooped and threw himself at me. Dominic slipped the ring onto my finger, simple and beautiful and exactly right, and kissed me while our son laughed between us. Can we get a dog now? Luca asked hopefully. Absolutely not, I said. Maybe a small dog, Dominic countered. You're supposed to be on my side. I am. I'm always on your side. But he makes a compelling case for the dog. I looked at them, my family, chosen and earned and absolutely perfect, and laughed. Fine, a small dog. Very small. Luca cheered again, already listing potential names, and in that moment, in our cramped apartment full of dinosaur drawings and love, I understood what my mother had meant about your heart living outside your body, because mine was right here, in this space, split between a 5-year-old who believed in pack mentality and a man who'd learned that fire was worth protecting. We'd started with a slap and a spark. We'd built something unshakable from defiance and trust and slow-earned love, and we were just getting started. The wedding was small, held in Sophia's backyard on a perfect spring afternoon. Luca was the ring-bearer, taking his job with utmost seriousness. Rosa cried. Patricia came with her husband. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row and dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. I wore a simple dress, cream-colored, nothing fancy, and carried flowers from the farmer's market. Dominic wore a suit but removed his tie halfway through the ceremony because Luca said it looked too stuffy. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Luca raised his hand. My heart stopped. Dominic went pale. I object to not having a dog yet, Luca announced seriously. We've been waiting forever. The gathered guests dissolved into laughter. The officiant, trying not to smile, said, Noted for the record. We said our vows, promises to love and protect and build a life together. I promised to be patient with his dangerous world. He promised to keep that world as far from us as possible. We both promised to always put Luca first. When Dominic kissed me, sealing the vows, Luca made a gagging noise that made everyone laugh again. You're stuck with us now, I murmured against his lips. Best thing that ever happened to me, he murmured back. The reception was casual, barbecue and music and Luca running wild with Marco and Rosa's daughter. At some point, Dominic pulled me aside, away from the crowd, his hand warm around mine. I have something for you, he said quietly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. A wedding present. I opened it, confused. Inside were legal documents, deed transfers, account information, paperwork I couldn't quite decipher. What is this? The restaurant. Luciano's. I bought it 6 months ago. He watched my face carefully. It's yours now, legally, full ownership. You can manage it, sell it, do whatever you want. But you'll never have to work 2 jobs again. You'll never have to choose between Luca's school fees and electricity. I stared at the papers, unable to process. Dominic, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to give you choices. Freedom. The ability to breathe without counting every penny. His hands framed my face. You've spent 5 years sacrificing everything for Luca. Let me give you this. Let me take care of you the way you've taken care of him. Tears spilled down my cheeks. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. But it's a start. He kissed my forehead. Say you'll accept it. Please. I thought about working double shifts, about counting tips at midnight, about the constant low-grade panic of wondering if we'd make rent. I thought about having choices, about security, about giving Luca opportunities without breaking myself. Okay, I whispered. Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me love you. Both of you. We stood there in Sophia's garden, holding each other while our wedding reception continued without us. And I felt the last piece of my old life, the fear, the exhaustion, the endless struggle, finally fall away. I'd started as a waitress with nothing but fire and a son to protect. I was ending as a wife, a mother, a woman who'd been brave enough to slap a dangerous man and smart enough to let him prove he was worth keeping. The fire hadn't dimmed. It had just found a home. 2 years later, on a bright Saturday morning, I stood in the yard of our new house, not a mansion, just a comfortable 3-bedroom with space for Luca to play, and watched my son teach our new puppy tricks. The puppy, a small terrier mix named Rexy, was not cooperating. Luca was undeterred, his 8-year-old patience infinite when it came to animals. Dominic appeared beside me, sliding an arm around my waist. He's never going to teach that dog to sit. Probably not, but he'll have fun trying. True. He pressed a kiss to my temple. Patricia called. Jake completed his requirements. He's asking about visitation. I felt the old fear try to surface, then let it go. What do you think? I think it's your choice, like the judge said. You've earned that right. I watched Luca laugh as Rexy licked his face, secure and happy and so loved. 1 supervised visit. At the park, 1 hour. If he behaves, we'll talk about more. And if he doesn't, then you'll remind him what happens to people who threaten our family. I said it lightly, but we both knew I meant it. Always. His arm tightened around me. How are you feeling, by the way? I pressed a hand to my still flat stomach, feeling the secret we'd been keeping for 3 weeks. Nauseated, excited, terrified. Luca's going to lose his mind when we tell him. I know. I smiled, imagining his reaction to becoming a big brother. Think we should tell him tonight? Definitely. Let him process before the baby arrives. Dominic turned me in his arms, his expression tender. You're going to be amazing. Again. We're going to be amazing. Together. He kissed me, slow and sweet, while our son played and our dog barked and the future stretched out before us, uncertain but full of promise. I'd rejected a Mafia boss's insult with a slap. He'd caught my hand and kissed the palm, recognizing fire when he saw it. And together, we'd built something neither of us had known we were looking for. A family forged from defiance, tempered by trust, and bound by love that refused to break. The fire I'd been looking for had been inside me all along. I just needed someone brave enough to stand in the heat without trying to control the flames. And now, surrounded by everything we'd built, our home, our son, our life, I understood that the best love stories didn't start with perfection. They started with courage, and sometimes they started with a slap.